Financial troubles are accelerating to a point of just no backing down. We keep seeing this bubble, and then we keep saying it's going to burst, it's going to happen. We see another bank collapse. We see the fact that our stock market is not doing as good as it should. It's up and down. The only thing holding it up is just a few companies. We see the fact that we're spending money like crazy as a culture. Student loans are getting paid when really Congress didn't agree to it. There's a lot transpiring with our dollar, and what's happening is you're starting to see banks feel the pressure. You're starting to see the stock market feel the pressure. You're starting to see people, more than ever, consumers, feel the pressure. Well, today let's talk about where our money should be safe, and also what is the importance to when it comes to understanding finances better. Is your money safe in these banks? I don't know. Let's talk about it. Today's video starts right now. Hey guys, welcome to the Max. Thank you so very much for being here this beautiful day on the farm here in South Mississippi. If you are new to the channel, go down here, press subscribe, ring the bell, tell us what you think about this video. Give us a thumbs up if you like it. Before we jump into the story, remember, not only finding us here, finding us at Twitter, at the Colby Mac. That helps you follow these stories because I'm always posting daily, not just one vlog, but several times during the day. So check out with that. Also, this is something that I've just started. There's a lot of times people email us and we can't get to all the comments, and you have some questions. Stick to the end of the video. I want to tell you about something new that I think would help out trying to get some of the information that you're wanting. We'll talk about that later in the video. Now, let's jump into today. Where's our money safe, and should our money be out of the banks, and what kind of panic are we really seeing with the bank failures? I want to mention the headlines that we're reading, and then we're going to talk a little deeper about them. First headline, what's the point in saving because is the bank safe? Bank failures begin again. Philly's Republic First seized by FDIC. Banks this week felt the most pressure and loss than any week since 9/11. Now think about that, since 9/11. The yen collapse, which is in Japan, has become disorderly. Look at the final sharp decline before it hits the floor. Fed's favorite indicator of inflation is hotter than ever. Savings are plunging and inflation is creeping back up. IRS releases draft of new crypto tax forms. Now that was a lot mentioned. The whole purpose of me mentioning every one of these is not to make you panic. It's to make you think, okay, what can we do to make sure our money is taken care of? What can we do to make sure that it's safe? Is it safe in these big banks? Now, there was a story last week, and we've talked about this about 6 months ago, that we worried about our money being in these accounts, especially as a conservative. Places like Bank of America and Wells Fargo, they were helping. There was a list of around 10 that were assisting the government in getting information about you, and you being a Trump supporter, or you being a conservative, are you supporting more Christian or conservative views? That's scary in itself. So that makes me say, I don't even want to be associated with those banks. So I would challenge you, if you're in those big national banks that's believing into this indoctrination and this woke ideology, you need to get out of those banks anyway. First and foremost, find another local bank, or find another place to put your money, credit unions, or at least just out of these big banks. So that's not what I'm talking about today, though. Even though we need to get out of the banks because of woke ideology, just so we know our money is safe and that we can always access it, you definitely need to get out of those. Remember, just last week, Bank of America deplatformed and debanked John Eastman, which was a Christian conservative lawyer that was part of the Trump camp. So you're seeing the fact that banks are saying, you know what? I'm going to debank you because we don't want to do business with you. So that beside the point of today's video is you don't need to be in these big banks. Now, why are we saying, is your money safe, or should we save, like the first article that we just read? For instance, with the Philadelphia Bank, Republic First Bank Corp. This bank was a pretty nice sized bank. It was $6 billion in assets, $4 billion in deposits. It has 32 branches that went across New Jersey, New York, and Pennsylvania. Well, it started struggling. Remember, we saw the biggest week of decline of money for banks. The losses were around $262 million worth of unrealized losses. And it came to maturity. The bond came to maturity, and therefore could not pay its debts. Remember, these banks do fractional lending, so basically they kind of, it's amazing. It's like a Ponzi scheme. We allow them to be a Ponzi because they're not one for one in lending. So if all of a sudden this bank has $100 comes in, they're able to lend up to way more than what that $100 value is. Fractional lending, sometimes it's 1%, 10%, and so forth. I wish I could find a one-to-one bank. There are some out there that are starting, none in my area, for instance, but if you see banks that are doing so much fractional lending and they're lending to maybe subpar lending, and also the fact that our economy is struggling, you're going to see more bank failures, not because the bank is bad. It's because they've put out way too much money. They don't have enough money coming in. The deposits and savings are down tremendously, worse than it's ever been. So just like the story of the worst it's ever been since 9/11 when it comes to bank losses, since the inflation is starting to climb up, we're starting to see Americans have less and less savings, meaning it's costing you more. Inflation is not going down. The economic situation for America is not getting any better. So this is where I come in and I just rail against all the money that the government's spending. No matter what you say they're spending it on, it's not feasible right now because we can't even balance a budget and we're spending more than we have. You think about your normal budget at your home. If you were to say, okay, I've got a utility bill, I've got a house note, I've got maybe a credit card, I got a an auto loan, I've got to eat, and I can only make X amount of dollars. With all those other things that we have add up to 100 to 150% of that, meaning you're already kind of upside down, so that's why you're using the credit card. Would it be smart for you to go get another credit card and just max it out on a clothing spree just for this weekend because you just decided to spend an extra $1,000 that you didn't have? No, we would call that ignorant. We'd call that foolish. Well, that's exactly what our government's doing. Biden just did another student loan forgiveness where, I mean, just multi-millions, hundreds of millions of dollars of your money that we don't have has been forgiven. We can't keep doing this because if we do, what we're going to do is we're destroying our own dollar. Look at Japan. Anytime you see these places like Argentina, Japan, Venezuela, what happens is they get so underwater in their debt because they don't have enough money. And all of a sudden, something bad happens, a reverse market crash, which is what they're talking about, which is called a melt up in our society. Read about it. Also, the yield curve. Those are big terms, but what happens is we're at a time where we have not seen the yield curve be this bad or this reversed in a melt up where the rich are getting richer, the middle class is leaving, and the lower class is getting bigger. What happens is you're starting to see the ramifications of bad policy. So when we say, okay, get your money out, put your money safe. Well, the first question is, okay, well, where did I put my money? Well, as I said, you've got to get it out of these banks that are woke, and you got to get them out of these banks that are regional to a point where they're underwater. Now, there's most banks that will give you a statement, especially if they're a publicly traded bank, or if they're a bank that's got a lot of stockholders or shareholders, there's financial statements that you can request, and most banks will give it to you. If you can get that, you need to say, okay, this bank is strong enough or not strong enough. For instance, I like local banks. I like banks that I know the presidents, I know the ties to the community. Now, I would love a one-for-one bank, meaning they get money in deposit-wise, and that's the only money they're sending out for lending. Well, there's not a lot of banks. I imagine less than 1% of banks actually do that. So if you could find that bank, awesome. If you can't, you better find a local bank or local credit union that has fiscal responsibility. That's not just giving money out to subpar lending. Maybe that is invested more commercially, or maybe that's invested more in the housing of the local community and not some bigger plan to where they're just a branch for someone that's in these big monster cities. Because what's happening is the ones that are tied to these big monster cities, these big monster areas, this ones that's gotten too many branches, what happens is they spread themselves out too thin, and all of a sudden, yes, they have billions of assets, but then they owe more than billions of assets. So they have way more liabilities than they do assets. In a perfect world, as I told you, debt is not bad in a perfect world. We don't live in a perfect world. We have breakdowns, we have mistakes. So therefore, if you already are tight on your budget, if something bad happens like a washer go out, a car go out, or if something tears up, then you're automatically underwater. Well, that's what happens with these banks. We're seeing major losses, and when those losses come across, and these banks are just making ends meet because people are not paying their debts back, people are not keeping deposits in the bank because they're struggling because they have to use their deposits to pay for their own goods, then you see the bank go underwater. And here's the problem with that, and here's where people miss the mark. What happens when banks go underwater? Well, everybody says, well, we're FDIC insured. It said half of Republic First banks of depositors were insured, meaning some had over the limit, some were not insured to a point where their money may not be safe. Now, will FDIC step in? Yes. Look at what FDIC has compared to what some of the banks that are in danger of failing. They don't have enough to cover it. So what happens then? What, the Fed steps in? America steps in, our main government steps in, again, we're already printing money that we don't have, printing money that we can't afford. That's what's making inflation go up. So I know that's a lot thrown at you when we talk about all this, but what happens is we're literally trying to take debt and to pay more debt to then turn around and say, I don't have enough coverage of debt to pay the hole that I've got. So it's like I've dug a hole and I've got a pile of dirt, but that pile of dirt is actually not enough to fill the hole back. So then I go and dig another hole to then use that dirt to fill up the first hole. Well, guess what I did? I opened up another hole. So what's happening is we are putting too much piles of debt on a nation that is unsustainable because the economy is not doing as good. People are taking their monies out. And again, in a perfect world, debt is not bad, but in a world that we live in, we have chaos, and guess what? That means things are not getting better when it comes to people's money. So what can we do with our money? Let's go back to the original question. What can we do with our money? Find the bank that is strong and has a good asset pool. I do not keep all my money in that bank, but I keep a significant portion of what I'm using, what I'm spending. Say you have a direct deposit or a monthly deposit coming in from your pension or from retirement or Social Security, let it go in. But there's times where you say, if I'm not using all this, do I want to keep it in this bank? I mean, is it scary to keep in that bank? Well, to me, again, like I've told you before, if I can't tangibly hold it, I don't tangibly own it. Do I have money in the bank? Absolutely. But there comes a point where I say, okay, I want to take some cash out. Now, cash is not king because guess what? It is right. Cash is king right now. So yes, I do keep cash. However, I am to the realization that cash is not always going to be king. We did a story last week that 98% of central banks are moving towards a CBDC. They've already got it set up. So they need a crash of the financial institution so we can see a reset. Isn't that funny? So when we see that, then all of a sudden we move to digitized currency. So if cash is not just the only thing, what else can we do? Barterable items. Are you buying barterable items? Have you looked at the stockpile videos that we've talked about where you could invest in things that's not just cash, but that are worth something when it comes down to it? Food, water, security, self-defense. Is it gold? Is it precious metals? Is it antibiotics? Is it something else that brings value to your family? Remember, let's think back 1800s. What brought value to people? It wasn't the paperbacks of cash. Yes, that was good to have. It wasn't just gold. Yes, that was good to have. They had to have food. They had to have land. They had to have animals. They had to have water. They had to have a source of income. So maybe you can invest in side hustles. Maybe you can find other ways to make money just in case your job shuts down. Just in case the bank failures and calls loans to your businesses and your businesses start faltering because guess what? With inflation going back up, interest is not going down even though Fed says they're going to cut rates. They can't because the inflation indicators are up. Your government is still spending money like crazy on both sides, not just one side, both sides. So therefore, what is happening is you're seeing a melt up. Some of the market's doing good, so it's making some people extremely wealthy. However, the middleweight class is losing, and they're the ones falling below some of the poverty line. Some of them are falling into the lower income brackets. Some of those are falling into the lower class citizens. Now, I didn't mean that as a degrading term. I'm saying financially, you can't afford to live right now. So what do? We invest in good banks. We turn around and invest in things that sometimes are not just having a digitized form. So not using your debit card and having some money out of the bank. So we talk about cash, we talk about gold, we talked about food, water, self-defense. We talked about investing in things such as land. Right now, land's crazy expensive. But if you could find a good deal, find a good deal. Find ways to buy a little piece of land. If you can't buy land, that's okay. Maybe you can take some money and start putting it up. Could you buy maybe a little business that you can lease and start doing a side hustle to then build another form of revenue coming in and income coming in? What do you think we do when we do YouTube or when we do our farm work or we come in and we do different side hustles? Our goal is to grow the amount of money coming into our home so then we can utilize it wisely, not just to put it up in the bank. Because remember, when we turn around and just put all our money in the bank, it's not doing anything but just sitting there. Well, inflation is going up more, so it's making your dollar worth less. So while your money's sitting in the bank, it's actually not making money, it's costing you money because you could utilize that in so many different ways. In barterable assets that are going up in value. Land, self-defense, I think of food. I made a comment not too long ago on a video. Food has went up over 30%. 30%. What other investment do you have that went up that much? So if you're investing in food, then you've made a 30% rate of return on your investment. So the food that you bought back in 21, 22, 20, the food you bought in 18, the food that you preserved, the fact that you have cattle and now that you're able to turn around and have your own beef or pork, you've added value because you have had a rate of return of 30%. Think how much value that is to you and your family. It's not about the fact that you're making money, it's the fact that you're saving money. It's never been about what you make, it's about what you spend. Our government makes a ton of money, but it spends more than it makes. This bank, First Republic, has billions of dollars, but then it spends billions more. It's not the money you make. It's not the fact that you don't have a lot of money in the safe. It's not the fact that you have a lot of money in the bank, or you're struggling because you can only bring home an extra $100 a month of extra savings. The fact is, it's not the money you make. It's how you spend that. So that $100 can easily grow over time compared to someone making millions of dollars and then being millions of dollars in debt. Please remember, it's not about the money you make. It's how you spend the money you have. Lastly, people have talked about Bitcoin. They've talked about putting more money in some kind of coins, digicoins, and crypto. I'm fully against that, and here's why. The same way with the bank. You may not know the inner workings of the bank and how unsafe it is. What we've seen with crypto, there's been some bad players in crypto. And remember, crypto is based on speculative value. So the more people invest in it because they think it's some great new invention, makes it worth more. Well, you're actually still not having anything more than what people say. Well, with the dollar's not worth anything because it's not based on gold anymore. Well, what is crypto based on? The fact that we have energy and the fact that people are going crazy over it. Bitcoin's only worth what the energy is allowed to process it. Not only that, Bitcoin is only worth when people put into it. So the more people and the more speculation on it, the more it goes up in value. So it's not real. You can't tangibly have a Bitcoin sitting right here beside you. It's all internet based. They are programming you for a CBDC. Come on, people, think about that. If you can't tangibly hold it, that get rich quick stable coin or get rich quick coin or crypto is just a farcity. Have people made tons of money doing it? Absolutely. But it is very risky, and if you are tight on your money, the last thing you want to do is put in something so speculative. So this is just my opinion, but we're going to see some strong market volatility. Does that mean we take all our money out of the market? No, you can't do that. But there could be a time where you say, okay, we're going to put in more conservative things like a money market to where it just grows a little interest but is safe. That may be an option. There may be a way that you can put in gold. There's plenty of companies that do that. That would be a great investment to do because gold right now is going up. Usually when gold goes up, the market struggles, and we're starting to see the first starts of that. It may be the fact that you say, you know what, it's not that I'm not going to invest in it, but I may slow that pace down and then utilize that money to pay off debts, or utilize that money to put a little bit extra savings in tangible goods back at home. Remember, retirements, they're still not as safe as we want them to be. We want people to invest in them. However, remember, you are passing down either the tax now in a Roth IRA, or either you're going to put the tax on you and the tax burden on you in a 401k. Either way, the government is still taxing you, and it's your money and you're not able to get it without being penalized before you're 59 and a half. So again, the more money you put there, remember that money, you can't use it right now. So if you're stocking all your money in that 401k and that Roth IRA, which some people will tell you to do, just be wary, you can't touch it, and then they're going to penalize you and overtax you if you decide to get it before 59 and a half. So it's your money that you've already been taxed on, or going to get taxed on, and then they're going to penalize you for wanting your money back. So let's just be smart. What are some things that we can do? Put in safe banks, put some cash at home, buy some things like precious metals, self-defense, barterable items, things like food, water, security, and finding ways to get out of debt. Making sure you're sticking to a budget. It's not the money you make, it is the money that you spend. So if you're only making an extra $100 this month or an extra $50 this month, that's better than someone making an extra $500, but then they're in debt up to their eyeballs, so then they're having to spend way more than $500 just to cover their minimums on their credit cards. Look for ways to side hustle. Look for ways to get out of debt and start focusing on real money. And what I mean by that is the value that can bring assets to you and your family. Just like we talked about with bartering, just like we talked about with security. The answer is not just retirement funds, the answer is just not in banks. But neither is the answer just in cash and gold. You have to look at the whole picture. The only way we're going to find full sustainability when it comes to our economic ability with us is the government's not going to quit spending, so then therefore we have to take care of ourselves. And that's when I go back to food, water, safety, shelter, security, and self-defense. It's always the best ways to look at assets, because that's the things that's going to take care of your family. That is wisdom. And you know what you do? You go back to, again, pre the industrial generations and all this new technology. You go back to the 1800s, you see what people did to collect money. You see what old civilizations did with their money. They did put some in gold, but ultimately they saw value in food, salt, bartering items, because they needed ways to make sure they could eat and drink and protect. Is your money safe in the bank that you have it in? Maybe, maybe not. Just be wise and start looking at decisions to say, you know what, if this market crash happens, if all of a sudden we see more banks struggle, should I put all my money in the bank? Because some people do and use just debit cards only. That could come back and bite you. Let me know your thoughts. Now, one last thing. We are part of what they call Connect. I'm going to leave a link down below. What that is sometimes if you want to message me, call me, or have a voice chat with me, there's fees. You can look at that. It's very economical. But if there's something you want answered and I can't get to it in an email and a comment just because I can't catch up with them all, this is a way that you can do that, and it comes directly to my phone, my app, and I can see it. And within the hour, I would answer you. So just check that out if you're interested in that. Those are there. If I can help you with any question, I would love to, and give you my opinion on just about anything that you can imagine. So please check that out if you're interested. Thank you guys for watching. God bless. Happy homesteading, y'all. Yeah.